2. All right. Well, this is for those of us who are for those of you who are watching the recording of this afterwards, and for those of you who are live now, thank you for coming. I'm Monica Ahens Madden. I'm the Ubuntu community representative on the community team. And today, for our special guest at the Grace Hopper celebration, I have Elizabeth K. Joseph here. Hi, Liz. It's nice to
Hello.
meet you. And you were on the community council.
hmm
And what years were you on the council from?
That's a good question. I'd have to look it up, but it
Yeah.
was something like, 2014 to, or maybe 2012 to 2016 or something. It was, yeah, like 6 years. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. And you are a contributor to the Ubuntu, or is
hmm
it Ubuntu or X Ubuntu? I've heard
It's
it both.
it's Ubuntu. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. And see that you've got your awesome shirt there.
Yeah, I got the
And
mouse logo here.
yeah, and so what is it that you specifically to for and so for those of you who don't know, um Ubuntu is kind of we have our our stock distribution, and that is what Canonical and the community collaborate on to make that Linux desktop distribution. But then we have all these officially supported community respins with different desktop environments, and Ubuntu, which uses the XFCE desktop, is one of those flavors. And so I might even go in chat and put the link to your site. So yeah, and so I just wanted to know, so you've been involved with the community for a while, and now you are working at IBM. And
Yeah.
so, and I think we will kind of move towards that, kind of talking about your journey, how you started with open source and got involved with Ubuntu. And then maybe how did that help you kind of maybe move into that job at IBM? So, how did you get started with open source? What was kind of your first encounter?
So it was somewhere around 2001, and I was my boyfriend had helped me get Linux installed. It was like an old version of Red Hat,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't start out with GNOME or KDE or anything. My husband was, or, well, he was my husband eventually, but my boyfriend,
Mm-hmm.
he was really into the Enlightenment window manager, which is
Oh,
super
yeah.
minimalist. So
Mm-hmm.
I had like no icons, no anything. So like he sets me up with his computer and it's like
Wow.
totally blank, like only a desktop. And I'm like, what? Like, what am I doing? And he's like, right click
Wow.
and like right click and like, okay. And then he taught me about like um, shortcuts and keyboard shortcuts and stuff. And that's kind of how I started. So like I never got used to like a really super like souped up environment for the desktop. But Enlightenment had like really pretty features on it. So like they had like
Mm-hmm.
transparency very early in the day. So this is like 2001, right? Like 20 years ago, they had desktop transparencies, like window
Wow.
effects for when the windows would move around your screen. Like they would like pop up and then come down. And there
Oh,
was some really
wow.
like for the time, it was like super impressive, especially coming from being a Windows user for a long time. So but when I in the course of that, I discovered that one of the widgets that I wanted to use on the desktop wasn't working the way I wanted it to. I wanted to add a feature to it.
Mm.
So it was written in C, which I didn't know.
Mhm.
But I was like, you know what? Let me open this up. So he boyfriend showed me like where to find the source code and like how to look it up, and then we learned enough C to figure out how to change it. So I changed it,
Nice.
recompiled it, and then popped it back on my machine, and now the widget worked the way I wanted to. And that was really revolutionary for me because as a Windows user historically, like you can't change things and you can't make a
Mm-mm.
difference on your desktop. And there's just no mechanism to do that. And finally, like, joining the Linux revolution and being able to actually make my desktop work exactly the way I wanted it to was just everything to me. So I was hooked. Like, that was the beginning of my open source journey. That was like,
Yeah.
I mean,
That seems like that must have been such a powerful moment to compile it and have it just
yeah. And
yeah.
it was such a silly little change, and it was not, but it was just like, you know what? I feel very powerful now.
Mhm. But it's a change that you made, and yeah, that's awesome. So at what point did you start, what kind of initially introduced you to the Ubuntu project? Because it seemed like you were kind of you started out in that super early version of Red Hat.
Yeah.
And so kind of very kind of minimalist environments here. So what initially kind of attracted you to Ubuntu?
So from Red Hat, I moved over to use Gentoo for a little while, and
Mhm.
then a bunch of my friends were using Debian, so I started using Debian. Um, and then it's kind of like an old joke, but I had some old laptops. I mean, I guess they weren't super old at the time, but the Wi-Fi wasn't working with Debian, and so I was like,
Mhm.
I should try this new thing, Ubuntu. Maybe that'll work, and that worked. So it was the Wi-Fi.
You
So
know,
for me, it was like it really was the joke, like, it's Debian, but the Wi-Fi works, and that's what it was.
we should put that on a t-shirt. No,
I
actually we
think there
shouldn't put
may
that on a
actually be
t-shirt.
t-shirts. Yeah. So like it was
Oh Lord.
totally cliche. Because I was actually doing a lot of work with Debian, and actually my first
Mhm.
sysadmin job was all Debian systems. And that was like, when was that? 2006, 2005, 2006. So I was doing Debian stuff. So it was really
Mhm.
making, coming over to Ubuntu was a very natural thing. And I think if you look at my Ubuntu forums account, it was created in like March of 2004. So
What?
I
Oh,
I've
so you were
been
literally like when it was in the development stage.
yeah, I think I started,
Wow.
yeah, like with, yeah, 14, I mean 404, I think was, yeah, or 406, whatever. I don't know, whatever,
I think,
404.
yeah, I think because I want to, because I think it's because our birthday is, I think is it was oh my gosh, I should know this because I saw that our birthday is October 26th, and that's the
Okay.
email.
Yeah, so I think
So,
I think I might have used Wardy like a little bit, and
mhm,
then went to the next one. But yeah, so that's how I found Ubuntu, and I didn't use it like as my full time thing. It was still just kind of a thing I threw on these laptops to play around with it because I was distro hopping a lot during that time. Um,
mhm, yeah,
so
that's fair.
playing with that, and then yeah.
Yeah, and so, how long had you been a sysadmin? Um, kind of. So how long had you been doing that?
So I'd been like, I was actually not working in computers. I was
Oh.
just had like an accounting job. I was doing accounts payable.
Mhm.
And then the Linux stuff was all just hobby stuff. So I was
Mhm.
a hobbyist from like 2001 through 2005. And in
Mhm.
2005, I started working at a company where I eventually became a sysadmin, and I was racking servers and doing Debian installs and just
Nice.
like having lots of fun. Hi, Valerie.
Yay! Hi, Valerie. So we've got so everyone. This is Valorie Zimmerman. She is from the Kubuntu. Is it Kubuntu or K Ubuntu? I've heard people say both. What's your preference?
I say Kubuntu, but I've heard both, and I don't care. I mean,
It doesn't matter. Potato,
it's
potato.
KDE. Yes, exactly. It's KDE on Ubuntu. We're part of Ubuntu. We are Ubuntu. You know,
Mm-hmm.
if people have in IRC, if people have basically non KDE problems, we say, we can help you here, and Ubuntu is the larger channel, and we're all Ubuntu. So, and
Exactly. Oh,
our developers work with, you know, everybody else. We're all one big community, which is why Liz and I met so many years ago.
God. As someone who hasn't been able to do in-person Ubuntu stuff, I like 2020 was going to be the year we were going to try to go to UbuCon Europe, and then it just didn't happen. But we were just talking about how Liz got into the Ubuntu project. And I love your Cosmic Cuttlefish shirt. They had cuttlefish at the I am in Seattle at the Open Source Summit. We went to the Seattle Aquarium and they had cuttlefish, and I'm like, like, are they cosmic? And thankfully, some people got the joke. So, yeah. But they were this big and they were super cute. So, Valorie, so when did you get into the project, and kind of what was it that that attracted you to Ubuntu and got your and how to get your attention?
Well, so I just showed up because I didn't realize that there was a button I had to push so that everybody else could see me. In any case, I was listening to Liz talk, and I also got involved with Linux before I got, well, actually, probably before there was an Ubuntu project. But, and mostly I wanted my son, who was most interested in it, to, try things out because he's much more hands-on geeky than I am. I have always used my computer as a tool. I am not, and I've always been interested in the community aspects. And I loved the KDE community, and I loved the Ubuntu community and the Kubuntu team. I think that my son originally, when he said, I think, Linux on the desktop is ready for you, I was having a lot of problems with Windows, getting the blue screen of death way too often. And this was back in 2001. And he put Kubuntu on my machine, and basically he said, blue or brown? And I said, oh, blue.
So a simple color preference.
I know. I had no idea what distributions were, any of the politics or history. I just knew about, open source growing and Linux growing. And I just had no idea of all these different ecosystems and how everyone interacted, which is mostly pleasant. What makes the news, of course. If it bleeds, it leads. So the fights,
made
the press. But really, I can't think of a time that Liz and I ever fought about anything, and or anybody. We get along with the Ubuntu people and Ubuntu Studio, and everybody just helps each other out. We test each other's stuff. We steal from each other.
Like we're just finishing testing week now, and that's something that totally came out of the flavors. And because some flavors have big teams, and it makes sense to have everybody testing. And now you and Ubuntu Studio share the Plasma desktop. And so that seems like, so you've got that in common where you can really help each other. And it's been, and especially I came to Ubuntu very late compared to all of you. I came into the Ubuntu Mate community in 2019, 2020. And so, but I was just struck by that spirit of cooperation in the flavors.
And every new group, some people are like, oh, there's too many choices, but I think it's a breath of fresh air. If you look at a natural ecosystem, if you see a new species of plant popping up, that means that the ecosystem is healthy.
Yeah, and like you don't want to see just like one species of something, because then it's just
monocultures. We know that they're very dangerous. So.
Yeah, like the whole banana crisis. So having lots of different kinds of things is just, and I think you're all exactly right that we're all Ubuntu, and so it's
And even now, when you talk about from the upstream, so from Gnome and KDE, people think we fight, but actually we don't.
No,
we have had desktop summits together. I hope we will again. I hope that we can even meet in person again one of these days if we
Yeah.
finally
And
getting around to getting the world vaccinated. But
yeah.
but we all have to work together for things like that. It's
Mhm.
just like we have these existential threats like climate change, and that takes the whole world.
Mhm.
Vaccinating the world takes the whole world. Um,
Yeah.
and to spread free and open source software, or even just to make the entire ecosystem better for people who are using
Mhm.
proprietary tools, we can all still cooperate. I am married to a
Exactly.
Windows user, and I have actually
And
had
it's
people
fine.
say, how did that happen? How could you marry a Windows user? I said,
Like, because I
well,
love him.
we got married in 1972. There was no Windows.
That does
Old.
help. That does help. No, no. So,
And I'll say like one of the things I noticed, like the people that I met in the Ubuntu community 10 years ago, I'm still working with a lot of those people today, even though we're not necessarily both working on the same Ubuntu projects anymore.
mhm.
And so it really ends up being like this broader ecosystem in general of like open source collaborators, technologists. There's
Mhm.
people I worked with on Ubuntu, and then I worked with them on OpenStack, and now I'm working with them on some Kubernetes stuff. And it's like
Mhm.
we're all on the same team here in this open source space,
Yeah,
and like at the cutting
exactly.
edge of technology. And so there's, I mean, yeah, it's been quite the ride, and the relationships that you make by contributing to open source and being part of this community have been so valuable. And it's super nice to be able to just like pop into a city and be like, hey Valerie, I'm in town.
Mhm. I know.
Like we know people all over the world now. Like I can go to any major city in the US and it's not just social media. It's like these like people I trust and care about, who I've
Yeah.
worked with, not at the same company, just in the same community.
Yeah. No, so I'm also kind of jealous that you all have gotten to go to the in-person Ubuntu things, and I'm still waiting for that. But now, both of you are, Valerie, in your case are, and I know that Liz, you were part of the community council, and you were really involved with those community leadership roles.
Mm.
Now, do you think that, can you tell me more? It's like, what was maybe one of the things that you were or are most proud of about being in that place where you're really kind of well positioned to help the community of fellow people wanting to contribute to the project?
I mean, it sounds super boring, if you've not been part of a project, but getting people unblocked, from challenges that they were having, was probably the most rewarding part of being on the community council. People would come to us with problems, and whether it
Mhm.
was something we could solve, by getting some resources from Canonical, or some process issue that we had to resolve in the project, or just getting resources moved around in some way. It was super rewarding because you had these contributors who really wanted to help and wanted to work on things, and they were just stuck by something, usually something so small, like they needed
Yeah.
access to a virtual machine, or they were struggling, with some sort of other small thing that I can fix super easily because we have the power to make changes, and
Hmm.
in leadership. And I think that was really just the most rewarding thing, because it felt like I wasn't doing much work, but it enabled our community members to do so much work. Like if I could just do this one little thing, if I could get this one tiny sponsorship, if I could get this one person what they need, will
Hmm.
unlock so much, potential from their contributions. And again, it sounds boring, but like it just
Oh no, it's powerful.
it was
It
the thing
really is.
that kept me going, in the community for so long, is how rewarding
Yeah.
that felt.
Exactly. And Valerie, what about you?
Well, I was never on the community council, but I am a Kubuntu counselor.
Yes,
Uh,
exactly.
Kubuntu was the first team to have a council, I think, a long time ago, because back in the early days of Ubuntu, it was sort of the Wild West. It was all hands on deck. Everybody was packaging for Debian and helping the packages come back to Ubuntu, and everybody worked together. I have as one of my goals getting that to continue and even get a little richer. There's been some glitches in the KDE process of that, but as usual, it's people, and I think folks don't realize how much it's not tech, it's people that makes
Yep.
everything work.
Yep. Open source is people.
Open source is people. It's built by people, and what made me want to contribute more was actually realizing that, because before that it just seemed like it sort of happened by magic. You put the discs in this, it used to be a stack, and
I know. Yeah. It's like
and
insert
now
disc one of blah, blah, blah.
exactly, and now it's a little thumb drive, if anything. Because if I run a virtual machine, which I remember thinking, that's magic, how would you even do that? And it just wasn't that hard. Like, you install this package, you download the new beta or whatever, you mount it, you run it. You
It's
have a
kind
whole
of
nother
amazing.
computer inside of your computer. What?
Yeah.
And yet it works. And, that's the thing about Ubuntu, that people have taken the really hard stuff and made it easier, made it so that the average person can do it, made it so kids can do it. Our best packager for a year, until his parents said, you have to stop doing this because you have to focus on your studies and graduate, was like 13 years old.
Yeah.
Now, I have never tackled packaging. At one point, when I had a little more time, I thought, I should learn how to at least make a basic package, even if it's not good for anything, just so I can say I know how to do it. But
it's hard.
It's a lot of tech stuff. But most of my time now is done doing genealogy, and I also am the president of the Genealogy Society, and I would have to say that my work in open source has directly led to that. Just knowing
That's
how
awesome.
to talk to people, how to get people to work together, and to do the techy stuff, because genealogy is extremely technically oriented. It's all about finding records, proving relationships and identities and so forth.
There's a lot of QA basically in genealogy.
Exactly. And also finding mistakes in previous research where two people are merged, or all kinds of stuff like that. I don't want to take this too far, but
yeah. So,
but I just want to say that for me, software is people, and that that is also true for Windows folks. It is also true for Apple people. It is made by people, and each one of us who helps out at all, even if we're just contributing money or testing,
time,
skill, taking the time to read a news story before it's published, to check the links, see if there's any typos, any errors of fact, all of those things count. Running the Twitter feed, whatever it is, all of that counts. So
exactly.
And I'd say, like, for me, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. I'll quickly finish up. A couple of years ago, the last time we met in person, actually, one KDE member went around at our last time we met in person and was taking little, like, 1 minute, I am a KDE developer and this is what I do. And was asking all of the people who did things like I do. I'm on the community working group. And it was just fantastic for all of us to really feel like, yes, I'm a coder, I'm a writer, I'm a translator, I'm, all of the things we do.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's awesome.
that plays directly into what I was going to say with like it puts you like contributing to a community like this really puts you on this like path of self-discovery too, because not only do you learn what you're interested in, like whether it's testing or coding or whatever, but you learn more of like what type of person you are in a community.
Mm-hmm.
Like if someone had told me 20 years ago, like you're going to be in leadership of a big project, I'd be like, no, I'm not. Like I just like helping people and pitching in and making things easier. And you know, someone will look at me and be like, Liz, what do you think leadership is? Right.
Mm-hmm.
So you know, it was very surprising to me that I ended up in the roles I did because I didn't think of myself in that way. But it turns out that, you know, being part of a community and understanding how people work, and that again is like, you know, translated into my career and what I ended up pursuing and everything too. So if you're, you know, curious about what kind of person you are, like join a community, whether it's open source,
Mm-hmm.
or genealogy, or, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
You can learn a lot about yourself, and it's really big way to grow.
Amen.
Yeah. Yeah. So for anyone, I know that, you know, we've had a lot of people come through and ask us, "Oh, do you have internships?" Which we don't have yet. But what would you say are the benefits for young women who are just starting out? Why would you recommend participating in open source to them?
Google
So
Summer of Code.
Besides for all the reasons that you just said.
Yeah, I am one of the administrators for KDE for Google Summer of Code, and
Mhm.
and Ubuntu as a project has also participated in the past. Um, and at one time we did Google Code in, which was awesome,
Mhm.
but that only lasted 2 or 3 years because it was so much work, and that was working with
Mhm.
high school kids basically, and even a few junior high kids. It was so rewarding. It was amazing, and I even was qualified to mentor that. So we did work on a wiki. So it was just fantastic.
Mhm.
There are lots and lots of resources, but the Google Summer of Code, it was a little downsized this year because of
Mhm.
the pandemic, but it's still an
Yeah.
awesome thing for
Yeah.
people to do.
Yeah, and actually we're going to be talking to Till from the desktop team. Was a Google Summer of Code mentor, I think, for Gnome and with open printing. And two of his students are going to be there. And so contributing to our upstreams, like whether it's Gnome or KDE or the variety of projects, all helps Ubuntu. So
Hmm.
it's, yeah.
The
yeah,
first
and I'll
time I
say
met
like
one of my previous students at a Pacific Northwest Linux conference, I just was over the moon. It's amazing.
Mm,
Sorry,
yeah,
Liz.
yeah.
those relationships that you build by contributing
Hmm.
are really super valuable. It's also there's like this double-edged sword of like everything being public, which seems
Hmm.
really intimidating, but at the same time you can also build up your resume in a way that you can show it off. So if you go to a company and you're doing all this proprietary work, you can't, like, you can go to the next company and say I did this, and they'll be like, really? Did you really do that? But with open source, you can be like,
Hmm.
yes, I did that. Look at
It's
my,
like,
you know, Launchpad or GitHub or whatever.
mm,
And I mean,
exactly.
it's been huge for my career. I mean, I interview at companies now. The last two jobs I've had, like, I didn't have a technical interview because they didn't need to do one. They're like, we've seen your work. It's right there. I'm like, yeah, it is. Like, you want to see how I set up a CI system? Right there. You want to see how I built this Python
Yeah,
program? There it is.
right there. And also the networks that you build
Yeah.
is just like when my first project was Ubuntu Mate. Martin Witt Empress, who is the head of that, he interviewed me for my current job, and I'm just like, hi. So chances are, and so it
I
is
totally
not.
had interviews like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and so there's so many benefits to being part of these open source communities. And it's like we need more women here. And if you have any questions about joining the Ubuntu community, then I think Liz and Valerie and I and any of the women that you've talked to this week and seen are great people to talk to. Well, I wanted to thank you both. I don't know when they're going to kick us out of this booth here. It's like being at the store at closing time, they're shooing you to the exit. But Liz and Valorie, thank you so much. And I would love to chat with you both longer, say on an Ubuntu on air, that we could have with everybody in the community. So, so great to get to talk to you. One day it will be in person.
Yes, yes.
I
Hopefully
know.
soon, please.
I know, fingers crossed. And so I don't know if we don't get kicked out soon, is there anybody who has any questions? You can put them in chat, put them in our Q&A. I'm seeing what people are here. Any questions, comments?
Well, I think we're all pretty easy to find online. So,
Yup, exactly.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn. I don't like LinkedIn, but
Oh, I know. I like I check it like every month. I'm like, oh yeah, that's a thing.
That's been a bizarre thing. IBMers love LinkedIn. It's so weird.
Weird.
Like they all post on LinkedIn. I'm like, why aren't you on Twitter? They're like, we like LinkedIn. I'm like, of course you would, IBM.
We can edit that part out for you if you would. But anyway, but thank you. And we had a really nice comment from Sierra from Canonical in the chat. And yes, it's been really great to see there's so many ways to be involved with the community. It can be development and code, but there's a lot of other ways too. And it all helps. So, all right.
Amen.
Well,
we need more people cleaning up the wiki.
I worked on the
So
Ubuntu
much
Weekly
old
newsletter like for ages. They always need help.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, whether
And
you're a
just getting the
writer,
news
whether
out.
you are, whether you know other languages and can be a translator, even if you
Yes.
just go through the wiki and check links and, I mean, there's just 1,000 ways to get involved, and every single one of them helps. So, and testing, and this week in particular,
Yes.
testing helps so much.
It does. And it sounds like we're going to try to find ways to make that a better process for people. So, yay. Well, I just wanted to thank you both for coming, and also thank you everyone in the booth who came, and also thank you anybody who watches this afterwards. So, all right, Liz, Valorie, thank you so much for your time and for everything that you've done for the project. It's so great to get to talk to you both here.
Thanks.
Thank you, Monica.
All right,
Thank you
you're
for
very
asking.
welcome. Of course. All right. Bye.